Welcome back, guys, to the channel. Today is August 16th, 2025, and just want to go over this again, guys, with the King stuff going on. If you guys have seen my last few videos, you guys know I've talked about the upcoming event at the end of the month, all connected to King Charles and the wrestling event. Please go back and this is from my last video, but go back and check that out. But I want to you keep following this riddle as we go because some big things. Today is a big day. All right. So today is the birthday of the Queen of Pop, Madonna. It's the death anniversary of the King of Rock and Roll, Elvis, and also the death anniversary of the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. So this today, August 16th, is a huge day for kings and queens, I guess you could say. And as I pointed out in my last stream, it's very significant that Madonna is turning 67 today because in Gematria, King equals 67. And again, this is the anniversary of Elvis, the King. This will be his 48th anniversary of his death. But Elvis died when Madonna was 19 years old. Again, King equals 67, which is the 19th prime. So the King, 67, dies when Madonna, the Queen, is 19. So 67, the 19th prime. But now she's turning 67, and Elvis died when she was 19. Again, 67, the 19th prime. And as I showed you, today just happens to be actually 1062 days after the funeral of the Queen Elizabeth, which is the gematria in reverse Sumerian of Charles III, which is our current king. So a lot going on here today with the kings and queens. And remember, I showed you in the last video that Madonna is clearly connected to King Charles. Also, she was born August 16, 1958, 23400 days before Charles became king and Queen Elizabeth died. And in the Latin, very important Jewish Latin cipher, Charles III equals 234, like Madonna's age on the day he became Charles III. So that's stuff from the last video. And again, big shout out to this channel, Farming from Scratch, who pointed me on to the Madonna thing. But remember, this all connects to King Charles' ex-wife, Diana Spencer. But what I really want to dive into in this video is all the connections to all these old kings. I'm really going to call this like a Game of Thrones, okay? So here is kind of like the very important point of this decode. Let me just make this full screen here. So there's the very famous saying, "The king is dead, long live the king." Now, this is a very old saying from 1400s when the sitting king dies and the new king takes over. So basically paying tribute to the old king, the king is dead, and long live the king, basically saluting the new monarch. All right, so this is important because I've really been, and you guys got to understand, this phrase in the 1400s, in 1422, let me just read what it says. The phrase, "the king is dead, long live the king," was first declared upon the death of King Charles in 1422, proclaiming his son, King Charles, okay, King of France, okay? So this saying actually is all about Charles because this saying originated from two Charles swapping places, basically one Charles dying and the other Charles taking over. And of course, we are in the time of King Charles, but not the France King Charles, the United Kingdom version. Now, why is the France so important with what I've been talking about? Because remember, the whole thing I've been talking about, guys, over the last week is that all this WWE show, which is about Cody Rhodes being the king symbol, is all happening in France, okay? And is connected to King Charles' wife dying in France. And it's not a coincidence, guys, that this phrase, "long live the king," the king is dead, long live the king, it connects to Charles and it connects to France, okay? So with that in mind, I decided to run the gematria on it. And this phrase originally was translated from French, of course, because it was the French who originally used it. Le roi est mort, vive le roi. I don't know how to say that, but this is the French phrase, okay? And if you translate this to English, which is the king is dead, long live the king, well, look at this. The king is dead, long live the king equals 286 in English, and in French, it also equals 286. So, wow, what an interesting connection. The French version of this saying, which is the original, equals 286, and the English version. That tells you that these things are perfectly coded, folks. The French version and the English version equal the same in gematria. Now, the other number that the English phrase, the king is dead, long live the king, equals 142 in the same cipher as death and state funeral of Charles III. Now, why did I use this? Well, because when Queen Elizabeth died, this is the title that they gave it. Right here, death and state funeral of Elizabeth II. So all I did was translate this. If there was going to be a code here for King Charles, I just took what they put for his mother, death and state funeral of Elizabeth II, and I just translated to his version, death and state funeral of Charles III. And that is 142. And that just happens to be in the same cipher as the king is dead, long live the king. So this will be perfect. And obviously, this 142, whenever this does happen to King Charles, will be huge because this is the gematria of both these phrases. Now, also, the person who will be taking over for King Charles will possibly, most likely, be his son, William. And King William V, because that's what he would be, equals 142. So how about that? Death and state funeral of King Charles III, 142. The king is dead, long live the king, 142. King William V, 142. And notice that the year that this phrase was invented in France was 1422, which is literally the same digits, just an extra two. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So with that being said, these two numbers I think will be important for whenever the King Charles event does go down with him passing. And it won't be, who knows if it's probably not real, but all of it's going to be coded, of course. So keep an eye on these two numbers in the future for King Charles and his possible demise. But I started thinking about today being the death of the King Elvis and also the birthday of Madonna the Queen. And I decided to go back 286 days for today, right? Because 286 is the gematria of both the French and English version of this famous saying, right? So I went back 286 days from today, and I got November 3rd, 2024. And something interesting happened on November 23rd or November 3rd, 2024. Not only was that just 2 days before the US election, that was also the day that King Philippe and Queen Letizia, Prime Minister, and all these people went to Spain for the floods, and they had mud thrown at them. So the king had mud thrown at him, the king of Spain. And remember, Spain's been a huge theme this year. Remember, Hulk Hogan died, he had the Spain colors. So Spain has been a huge theme, okay? But anyway, 286 days before today, Elvis's birthday, or Elvis's death day, the king had mud thrown on him, okay? Like being buried in mud and dirt, right? And again, the phrase, the king is dead, long live the king, equals 286 in French and English. So that's not a coincidence. Now look how many days King Charles was born before King Philippe, who had mud thrown on him. 19 years, 77 days. Well, Elvis died on 8/16/1977. So what's the chances that this guy gets mud thrown on him 286 days later, like the phrase, long live the king is dead? You get Elvis's death date, and Elvis was born in 1977, and these two kings are born 1977 apart. Okay? Not a coincidence, guys. Absolutely. Perfect. Now, remember, Charles has a well-known cancer diagnosis, which he announced on February 5th, 2024. And if you go from the cancer diagnosis announcement to today, Elvis's death date, the king, it's 558 days. Well, Charles III equals 558, so how perfect after his cancer diagnosis to the king's death today, 558, like his name. And considering we connected the king that got mud thrown on him last year, when he was born, King Philippe, he was born in the moon was in lunation 558, which is, again, the gematria of Charles III. So again, the lunation of the moon is very important. We've gone over this many times, but the moon lunation is counting the new moons ever since 1923. So that means this guy was born in the 558th moon since that start. And it's not a coincidence because this connects him to Charles III and this 558 connection to today and Elvis. Now, King Philippe not only connects to King Charles, as I just showed you, but his birthday is connected to all the other Charles from England. Let me show you how. Well, at least two of them. So the first thing is he took office as king on June 19th, the King of Spain. And when did the king that everyone knows, James, King James, who's on the Bible, the most famous king probably, he was born on June 19th. So King Philippe took office as king on King James' birthday. Now, King James' middle name was Charles. Okay, so we're going back to the Charles thing. And Charles, his son, King James, his son's name was Charles, and he became Charles the First. Well, King Philippe is born on the day Charles the First died. So the son of King James, King Philippe, is born on the death date of Charles the First. So he became king on the birthday of King James, or James Charles, and he died, or he was born on the death date of King James' son, Charles the First. So it's perfect, guys, right? Now, and again, I already connected him to King Charles with this thing, but also there was because now we're on Charles the Third, right? So there was another Charles, Charles the Second, who died on 2/6. Well, Charles 2/6 is a very important day because that was the last day that a king died before Queen Elizabeth, because Queen Elizabeth's father died on 2/6. So I'll get into that in a minute. But so not only did King Philippe get mud thrown on him 286 days before today, like long the king is dead, long live the king equals 286. If you look up the gematria of mud, it equals 234 in the same cipher as Charles III. And again, this was the number that I showed you with Madonna, which today is her birthday, and King Charles III equals 234. And you're telling me that Philippe, who I just connected to Charles to last year, the main theme was that he had mud thrown on him, and mud just happens to have, and again, this isn't a cipher where it's very hard to have matches, mud equals Charles III. That's crazy to me, all right? Because, again, that's pointing to this same theme. And if you go from King Charles' coronation to today, it's exactly 119 weeks. And we know how important the 119911 code is. But yeah, I mean, exactly 119 weeks since his coronation. So that's just another interesting. But again, I told you I was going to talk about the other King Charles, Charles II, the one before this one that we have. He died on February 6th, which again, crown equals 26, queen equals 26. The day now, Queen Elizabeth, the father of King Charles, our current, her father, King George, died on February 6th. So the last king that ever reigned before Charles, this current one, he died on February 6th. And that was one day after the cancer diagnosis. Remember, I told you King Charles announced his cancer last year on the 5th of February. The next day was the death anniversary of King George and the death anniversary of Charles II. So the last King Charles died on February 6th, and the last king before King Charles III died on February 6th. So that tells you something about this date and how important it might be and just how scripted it is, okay? But remember, in the beginning, I told you I used Queen Elizabeth's death and state funeral of Elizabeth II, and I just translated it to what it would be if Charles died. Well, I coded it, and if you go and you use that gematria, death and state funeral of Charles III, and you go from that 2/6 date, which is the last two kings, the last Charles king and the last king, George, to die, you go from that date, it's 191 days. Well, that's the gematria of death and state funeral of Charles III. Okay. And I'm not saying he's going to die today, guys, but this is just more programming for whenever they do pull the trigger. This day, August 16th, today, will be a very important part of whenever that happens. Okay. Could be this month, could be next month, could be a year from now. I don't know. But it will come. Okay. We know it will come. And as I shared last night in my community section, if you go from the actual death date of the last King Charles, Charles II, to today, it just happens to be 177674, right? Which, if you break that up, it's like 177674, which is like America's birthday. Of course, America, the United Kingdom, America broke free from the United Kingdom. So there's all connected, guys. And Trump, they had no King's Day on Trump's birthday this year, which was also a clue for King Charles dying, I think. No King's Day on Trump's birthday. We already had the Pope die after Trump dressed up as the Pope, right? So I think maybe King Charles will be next in the line for the Trump sacrifice. But a few more things. If you go from Charles' coronation to today, it's 834 days. Well, that's actually the same amount of span between King Charles' grandfather, King George, to the birth of this king, who I already connected, 834 weeks exactly between King George's birth and King Philippe's. So that's just another interesting connection I just thought I'd throw in here. But we also just got news, like yesterday or 2 days ago, that there was a death in the news of a guy who's born on August 15th, which again is just yesterday, and today's August 16th, but he was born in 35. August 15, 1935. So he was born the year Elvis, the king, was born. Elvis was born in 1935, but Elvis died on August 16th. So this guy, Lionel Taylor, he is seriously connected to both Elvis and King Charles, and he just died, right? He just died on August 6th at 89. Well, 8/15 was his birthday, and he died on August 6th, right? So 1935, again, is Elvis's birth year, but he was born in Kansas City, which I've talked a lot about because if you abbreviate King Charles in English, I've showed you the Latin connection with the CR, but if you just abbreviate King Charles in English, it's KC, which connects to the Kansas City Chiefs, KC, right? So, but look at the last thing that Lionel Taylor, the guy that just died on August 6th, look at the last thing he ever did. He was a football player, but the last thing he ever did in his career, it shows on Wiki, is he coached the 1998 England Monarchs. Are you kidding me? So I just connected him like this to King Charles, right? And Elvis. But then we find out the last thing that he supposedly ever did with football was he was a coach of the England Monarchs. Look, right here, Lionel Taylor, the coach of the 1998 England Monarchs. I mean, how about that? So this guy's death just seems to be perfect. And look at this. The guy that just died who coached the Monarchs, his name was Lionel Thomas Taylor. And Lionel Thomas Taylor, well, it equals 1074. And today, August 16th, is 1074 days after Charles became king. And again, this guy just died he was just in the news for dying a few days ago. And his gematria points us to 1074, which leads us from Charles becoming king to today, Elvis's death anniversary. But look at this. Lionel Thomas Taylor also is 3 words, and it makes up 18 letters. And guys, I've been talking about how King Charles' cipher is CR, and CR is 318. So the fact that his name is 3 words and 18 letters, I don't think that's a coincidence, okay? And if you go from Charles' actual birth to today's date, he's actually turning exactly 4,005 weeks old today, exactly. And that's the 89th triangular number. and he became king in England on the date 8/9. Okay, so he's turning 8/9 triangular weeks old today, and he became king on 8/9. And this Lionel Taylor, who I just connected, he died at 89, which again is King Charles' day he became king. And here's the 234s again, guys. Charles III, 234. And I've showed that number multiple times already, but look at the full gematria and just basic English gematria. Lionel Thomas Taylor, 234, like Charles III in Jewish Latin. And today, August 16th, I was looking for news connected to royalty on CNN, and this is what we get, guys. On Madonna's birthday, this is what's on CNN. This is a screenshot. American Prince JFK Jr. And JFK Jr. died in a plane crash. And I've connected this whole month to King Charles' ex-wife who died in a car crash. Notice he has George here. George. Well, this is obviously connected to George Washington, but it's also could be connected to King George, who I already connected in this decode. But this is on the front page of CNN today, dodging bullets with the FBI's Louis Free. I mean, and look at President Madonna. On Madonna's birthday today, they have a headline showing President Madonna and Madonna dressed as George Washington and connecting it to JFK Jr., who was supposedly American royalty. So this all connects to the Kennedys. So there's something to look into there for sure. And then this is what brings it all together, guys. Last night, on August 15th, again, which was Lionel Taylor, this guy who just died, that was his birthday, August 15th. If he was still alive, he died just before his birthday. WWE, which brought all this together in the first place because of the event happening at the end of the month in France, they had a show last night on August 15th, and it just happened to be in the center of the ring. Their ad was King of the Hill. I mean, of all things. And look at the colors, guys. The yellow and the red. That's Spain's colors. Look at the guy wearing the yellow and the red. Yellow and the red. Spain. Hulk Hogan just died. He wore yellow and red. So what is the chance, guys? I'm pointing to the next, today, but yesterday was the show for WWE. So they had to pay tribute to it yesterday because there's no show on Saturdays in WWE. So they had to put the King of the Ring or the King of the Hill right there in the center of the ring. They had to put the right colors for the Spain connection I already made with the Spain King getting mud thrown at him. And look at the wrestler who gave his speech, like King Charles gave a speech yesterday. Look, King Charles set to deliver a special announcement on August 15th. Okay, that was yesterday, right? Well, yesterday on August 15th, the Scottish wrestler Drew McIntyre, and remember, where is King Charles currently at? He's going to be at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. That's where his mother died. So he's today, and yesterday I think too, yesterday he was commemorating VJ Day, which was a huge day, which is Victory over Japan Day. And he gave a speech yesterday, and he was in Scotland, right? And on WWE last night, when all this is going down with King Charles being in Scotland and him giving a speech, you had a Scottish wrestler giving a speech with the standing on the king. I mean, come on now. And look at the gematria of King of the Hill, because King of the Hill equals 136, 215, and 816. Well, there's your 816. Today's 816, the death of the King Elvis. King of the Hill equals 816. Like CR Fashion Book. Look at the gematria match. Well, what's CR Fashion Book? Well, that's Madonna's book that I covered in my last video. I told you that Madonna released a CR Fashion Book in connection to King Charles, whose initials are CR, right? Let me just find it. Yeah, right here. This is Madonna's fashion book. It's called the CR Fashion Book. So King Charles' initials are Charles Rex, which is CR, right? And it just so happens that this King of the Hill, which WWE pointed to last night during Charles' speech, they had a Scottish wrestler standing on the king, giving on King of the Hill, which equals CR Fashion Book, which is clearly connected to King Charles. And what's interesting, guys, is tomorrow is the 136 days left in the year, August 17th. But look at this. There was the death in the news this year of, well, let's look at this. Look at the new season, the 14th season of King of the Hill just premiered. That's why WWE is promoting King of the Hill last night on August 4th. Obama's birthday, by the way. But look, it says Return of the King. So the first episode of this new reboot of King of the Hill is called Return of the King on Obama's birthday. So we got to think about that, of course. But this is all about money too. I've been talking a lot about money. Look at the one here: chore money, chore problems. And the last episode is a sounder investment. So about investments, huh? But anyway, let's just put all this together. King Charles in Scotland yesterday. They aired a message from him on VJ Day. And the same night, the Scottish wrestler in WWE gives a speech on the King logo. Look how he's standing right on the King and he's pointing to the ground, getting you to clearly see that it's all drawing attention to the King that he's standing on. And this guy, McIntyre, he's Scottish, of course, but McIntyre, he was part of when Queen Elizabeth died. He was the wrestler in the Clash at the Castle. Let me just bring this up. He was the wrestler right here back in 2022 on September 3rd, 5 days before King Charles became king. Here's Drew McIntyre in Scotland versus Wales, right? And the guy representing Wales, the Dragon, he died, or he won and beat the Scottish guy, like Queen Elizabeth died in Scotland, okay? And now the next event coming up that's called Clash is in Paris at the end of this month on Princess Diana's death anniversary. But look who's on the front of this year's Clash. It's Roman Reigns, the guy who was representing the Wales before. And Roman Reigns is known for having cancer, and so is King Charles. So this is why I'm just trying to really get across the point that something big here is going on with this King stuff. And just one last thing I got to add. This video is getting long. But remember how I told you King of the Hill equals 215? And yesterday they had the King of the Hill on the center of the ring in WWE. And then I'm talking about today, or I'm talking about yesterday when they had the King of the Ring there. Look at this. It's 215 days since the first ever episode of King of the Hill, which aired on well, if you go, the anniversary. So if you go to 2025 and you go to the anniversary of the first episode of King of the Hill, which aired on 1/12, it's 215 days to yesterday when they had King of the Hill on the ring, and King of the Hill equals 215. Now, not only was it that, but there was also a King of the Hill actor who died, Jonathan Joes. He died this year on June 1st, and if you measure from his death to yesterday, and you add the day, it was 2 months and 15 days. So from the first episode ever of King of the Hill anniversary to yesterday was 215 days. And from the death of the actor from King of the Hill who died this year in Texas was 2 months and 15 days. So the same number, just 2 months and 15 and 215 days, right? And again, this is the gematria of King of the Hill. And this is what they put right in your face yesterday on 8/15. And this is, of course, when Trump was meeting Putin. So that this, I'm sure, all ties to that too. But I mean, the point is, all this stuff, I'm just showing you the patterns, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed. And again, I will continue to track this the whole month because I think it's something big going on this month with this King stuff. So take care out there, everyone. Thank you for watching as always, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.